drop one of those gold coins in there.
Happy holidays, everyone. Welcome into Sports Millions over here on the grid. I'm Joe Madden, joined today by Tom Vecchio. Tom, we've got a great show today. We're going to go over 3 matchups in the NFL. We're going to start with the Broncos and the Bengals. Let's jump straight into this one. I'm expecting a massive game out of both of these teams. So many playoff implications here. What are you thinking for this one?
Yeah, awesome game. And not just this, we have a whole set of games that we're going to go through today that we have to break down for various different reasons. And like you said, huge playoff implications for this. Both teams are still alive. Obviously, the Broncos a little bit more secure in their playoff spot. Must-win game for the Bengals. Literally, they need to win this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. So initially, I would expect the defenses hopefully to show up a bit more. But given the talent that we have on offense on both sides, I think there will be some players going well over their numbers. I'm ready to get going.
Yeah, I'm ready to get going as well. And you mentioned those playoff implications. The Bengals need to win this week and next week. And we look at the Broncos here. With a win, they will clinch that playoff spot and potentially eliminate the Bengals, Dolphins, and Colts. So this is huge for them. With the loss here, they will have to beat KC next week. So a lot of pressure on both of these teams. But let's jump into Bo Nix here. I think it's fascinating looking at his picks that we're able to do. What are you expecting out of Bo Nix? Because we know he's been that dual threat quarterback out there for the Broncos. We do have a rushing yard pick of 21.5. We also have his passing yard pick of 233.5. Would you be willing to take either of those higher or lower?
I don't mind the passing yards at 233. And this really comes down to the fact that the Broncos have not been good at running the ball over the past few weeks. It's not Javonte Williams. It's not Jaleel McLaughlin. They're not getting players going on the ground. That's what it comes down to. We're looking at some of these players, and we're looking at the mid-30s for their rushing yards. So at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, essentially, I think it will fall on Bo Nix's shoulders about getting the offense down the field. So I like him when it comes to passing attempts the most, but that does correlate a little bit with passing attempts. So I'd be fine with going to the passing attempts. And really, we have not seen a whole lot from this Cincinnati defense at any point in the season. They're constantly getting yards put up against them. I don't want to look specifically at last week when DTR was out there for the Browns. But over the course of the season, we have not been afraid of the Bengals defense in any capacity. So I think the yards are totally fine for Bo Nix. And like you said, the rushing game has gotten going for him at times. So that's a fine pick for me, but I side with the yards and the attempts to start.
Yeah, those attempts coming in at 33.5. I can definitely see that going higher than that number. Like you said, the Bengals secondary here, the Bengals defensively overall just haven't been the team that they've needed to be able to get these wins. We know, though, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, they have been feasting. Is there anything you're looking at here for them?
Joe Burrow, and I've said it routinely about him, he's never been the problem with the Bengals, right? It's always been their defense. If Joe Burrow is going out there and scoring 30 points, the defense is giving up 35 points and they're just losing games. So if you just give Joe Burrow a competent defense, we're going to see them, come away with wins, which hasn't been the case. So therefore, when it comes to Joe Burrow, higher than 36.5 passing attempts has been one of my favorites. I've routinely said that on pregame shows, recap shows. It does not matter because at the end of the day, I think Chase Brown is a good running back. No doubt about it. He's been solid, especially this last half of the season when Zach Moss has been out. But Burrow passing at a high volume is what we have seen from Cincinnati. Their pass play percentage is over 60%. You paid him all this money for a reason. And at the end of the day, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, like you said, that's their best option on offense. That's the best route for them to score points. Chase Brown is good, but it's Joe Burrow leading the team down the field. I think we're going to see good stuff from both quarterbacks in this game.
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to see great stuff from both quarterbacks. Defensively, what kind of resistance do you think the Denver Broncos are going to provide in this game? Because we know Denver in some games, their defense has been absolutely outstanding. In others, they've been actually hit hard by some teams here. And you look at Joe Burrow and what he's able to do out there on the field. It's been hard for some of the best defenses to slow him down here, Tom.
Right. And when we look at Denver overall in terms of like, okay, what happens if Denver gets out in front? What happens if Cincinnati falls behind. Seeing Denver, 99.8 rushing yards allowed per game. That's the 5th lowest in the league. So it kind of plays into what I'm expecting. If Denver is this solid defense, and granted, they've been a little bit up and down the past few weeks, that collapsed to your Chargers, a couple of weeks ago in the second half. Terrible game against the Browns on that Monday night game. If their rushing defense does show up, that will just lead to more passing from Joe Burrow. So I have more faith in him. I have faith in the Denver defense to show up since it is such an important game. Obviously, Sean Payton's going to have them ready. So I would shy away from Chase Brown. I think I have faith in the Broncos defense, especially their run defense. But that just leads to yards in the air for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, it absolutely does. He will need to move that ball through the air nice and deep. What are your thoughts here for Courtland Sutton? I think he's interesting to look at. He has a pick of 67.5 for his receiving yards. If we do see Denver get down, which I expect to see them get down at some point because we know how easily it seems that offense on the Bengals can move that ball. 67.5 receiving yards for Courtland Sutton. I like it to the higher. I do think he should be in for a big day, Tom.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Courtland Sutton. I've said it, time and time again. When it comes to the Denver passing offense, and this also is coupled with the fact that I just don't have a whole lot of faith in anyone that they put in the backfield. We see this, rotation of players, a backfield by committee, and we just don't see a consistent amount of production on the ground. Where there are games, like you said with Bo Nix, he gets the ball moving on the ground by himself. There are games where Bo Nix is leading the team in rushing. That really just should not be the case. So when we look at the Denver passing offense, it's Courtland Sutton, and then it's everyone else. He has 119 targets this season. The next highest player is a running back with Javonte Williams up at 64. So I love Courtland Sutton to pick up yards on a week in and week out basis when he's the primary target in their passing offense against this Cincinnati defense that we're not worried about. Give me Courtland Sutton higher time and time again.
I like him to the higher as well. And we mentioned Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and mentioned that we are going to trust in Joe Burrow there to really get that ball moving deep. I just want to mention the receiving yards that we can look at here for both of those players. Jamar Chase coming in at 93.5. I really do think between him and T. Higgins, one of them has to go higher than their number. T. Higgins coming in at 70.5. Which one do you have more faith in to go higher on their receiving?
It's got to be Jamar Chase. He's better in real life. He's just a more consistent option. We do see these kind of slow games from T. Higgins at times where we see him fall. I don't want to say this Cowboys game where he ended up 2 catches for 23 yards or 24 yards or whatever it was. But there are times we see him falling behind, and we see Jamar Chase taking the lead with 14 targets, and that just puts him in the spot to go higher than his number time and time again. So I want to say start things with Joe Burrow, but if someone's not comfortable going there, Jamar Chase is the answer. Let's just cut to it. It's Jamar Chase when it comes to the Bengals offense.
Absolutely. And that connection between the two of them is so fantastic out there on the field. It can't be denied. So I'm looking for that as well. Now, we do have some defensive picks, players that we can look at here, especially for the Denver Broncos. Zach Allen, he has a number of 2.5 for his tackles plus assists. We could look at that to the higher, or Nick Bonito. He has a 2.5 as well. Do you like looking at these defensive players?
It is, and it depends on, again, when we always talk about the multiplier, what are you adding from other games? So if you are expecting Denver to be out ahead, Nick Bonito has been great at picking up sacks, getting the pressure, and there have been times that we have seen the Bengals offensive line struggle. So I think that's fine to go to depending on what you're picking from the Bengals side. But I want to start in with locking in Joe Burrow and his passing attempts higher than 36.5. And I have a whole lot of faith in Courtland Sutton. So higher than 67.5. That's what I want to lock in. Joe, what do you have?
Okay, I love where you're going with yours. I'm going to look at Bo Nix here. I really do expect him to be able to move that ball on the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm locking in him higher than 233.5 passing yards. And then I will look at Courtland Sutton. I can't take 2 from one team. I love the Courtland Sutton pick that you're going with. I will go with Jamar Chase here, 93.5 receiving yards to the higher. But you guys, we have 2 more games to break down. We'll be back after the break, breaking down the Cardinals and the Rams. So don't go anywhere over here on Sports Millions on the Grid.
one of those goals going in.
Welcome back to Sports Millions over here on the grid. Enjoy Sports Millions Pick'Em, but hate making picks yourself? Well, Sports Millions has you covered. Head on over and play Sports Millions Blitz'em right now and let the computer do the work. Go to sportsmillions.com/blitz'em and be able to win big prizes without having to make a single pick yourself. That's sportsmillions.com/blitz'em. Now, Tom, we have to talk this matchup between the Cardinals and the Rams. It's going to be really interesting to see if Kyler Murray and company get up to play that spoiler role in this one. We know the Rams need to come in here and get the win. The Cardinals not playing for anything except to make the Rams' life difficult. What are you thinking here? Do they have that motivation?
Yeah, like you said, there's varying degrees of motivation in this game. Rams in a big spot. Depending on what we get on the outcome from them tonight, obviously leading to a huge game to close out the season in Week 18 against the Seahawks. So I'm expecting the Rams to be ready for this game. A well-coached team, a team that has proven it in the playoffs before. This is essentially a playoff game for them. I do think the Cardinals will put up a good effort, but ultimately it's all Rams in this game. I expect some good yards from maybe Trey McBride on the other side of things, as he has been phenomenal for the Cardinals. But I think this starts with the Rams. There's a number of different ways you want to go about it. You can go to Matt Stafford, you can go to Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. We have a lot to get to for this Rams team, which I do think is in a great spot to move into the playoffs.
They are. This team's sitting a win away from clinching the NFC West. And they're going to bring everything they've got versus the Arizona Cardinals, a team that's really been struggling as of late. You look at Kyler Murray and how much he's been turning over that ball. He's had 6 interceptions in the last 5 games, you guys. And that offensive line has allowed him to be sacked 11 times. It just hasn't looked pretty for this team out there. And I expect the Rams to dominate in this one. I just don't think that motivation factor is there for the Cardinals to come out and play spoiler. Now, you talked on Kyren Williams. Williams has been fantastic out here for the Rams. We've got a couple of different picks we can look at for him. We have 9.5 for his receiving yards, 92.5 for his rushing yards, and 105.5 for his receiving and rushing yards. I'm leaning towards that one to the higher. Is there anything you're liking here, Tom?
I think you go to either of them, rushing or the rushing plus receiving. It's just either one's a great choice. I think the rushing plus receiving is obviously a little bit safer because it does leave you multiple outs. You could get to the 80 and then 25 in the air, whatever it might be, any combination of those. What we saw from Chuba Hubbard last week for the Panthers going up against this Cardinals defense, if Chuba Hubbard, granted that game went to overtime, just to be clear. So if Chuba Hubbard can go for 152 on the ground and he had another 13 in the air, Kyren Williams can do that. So I will absolutely side with you when it goes to Kyren Williams higher when it comes to rushing and receiving. Again, we get ourselves a little bit safer option. He has multiple paths to getting over that. I'm totally on board with Williams this week.
Now, if we're seeing him go over that, do we still think Matt Stafford can go over higher than his passing? His passing coming in at 239.5. I do still expect him to be able to do this. We have seen some struggles, though he hasn't been putting up higher numbers as of late, Tom.
Yeah, last week was a little bit slow against the Jets. It was an outdoor game. It was super cold. Take that for what you will. 239.5, I think, is a solid spot to get it. Again, it depends on how much we see from the Cardinals overall, because if we see the Rams jump out to a 21-7, a 24-10 kind of lead, it will be the Kyren Williams show. So if you are expecting Matt Stafford to have to push higher than 239.5, you probably should be expecting Kyler Murray to have a big game as well, which I'm not exactly sure we're going to be seeing that. So I think Kyren Williams is absolutely the safer option when it comes to the Rams, but I can't fault someone for taking a Super Bowl winning quarterback in an extremely important game late in the season and going with Matt Stafford. I have no problems with it. I just simply prefer Kyren Williams this week.
Yeah, I prefer Kyron Williams as well. I definitely think he's a player that you want to look at here for the Rams. Now, you mentioned Kyler Murray, and we look at Kyler Murray in the first matchup versus the Rams, and he dominated on them. He was able to put up, 266 passing yards. His higher or lower pick for this one is 225 and a half. I just don't trust that motivation for Kyler Murray out here. Do you?
It's tough. It's tough. It's also I can see a path to Kyler Murray getting there simply because James Conner is not fully healthy. We're waiting on final confirmation on whether or not he'll play or not. So I totally agree with you that what's the motivation? Kyler's been turning the ball over. What level of consistency are we getting from him? But if they aren't able to move the ball on the ground, the yards could get there in garbage time for Kyler Murray. So I think that's fine. Trey McBride, though, that's my favorite option when it comes to the Cardinals. And if we do not see James Conner play, going to Trey McBride higher than 61.5, that's the best option for the Cardinals offense to move the ball down the field. It will be with Trey McBride, who has been absolutely awesome this year. So the Kyler, again, you could take it if you want. You want to wait until we get the James Conner news. That's totally fine. But I'm personally siding with Trey McBride this week.
I completely understand because the Cardinals to win games, Kyler Murray has to get that ball to Trey McBride. But just sometimes, Tom, I feel like maybe he doesn't like Trey out there because I'm not seeing him get that ball to him. But Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, is another player that's motivated in this one for the Cardinals. I'm going to look at his receiving yards higher than the 51 and a half because I do think that connection, Kyler Murray does tend to get him the ball, give him a couple extra looks out there. And I do think Marvin Harrison Jr. can break away and really rack up those receiving yards. So I will lock in the 51 and a half receiving yards here for Marvin Harrison Jr. Where are you going with the Cardinals? And then we'll lock in our Rams.
Yeah, it's going to be Trey McBride. At the end of the day, I think he's awesome. And Marvin Harrison, especially that deep ball potential that he has, he could go over 51 and a half and just 2 catches, maybe even 1 catch. But Trey McBride, I think, is the solid option, especially if we're waiting on the James Conner news. I will side with Trey McBride. And then I believe we're on the same page when it comes to Kyron Williams, higher than 105 and a half rushing plus receiving from him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is just the best way to look here at the Rams, looking at Kyron Williams higher than that 105 and a half receiving and rushing yards. I'm expecting a big day out of him. If you just want to look at his rushing yards, you can look at that to the 92 and a half to the higher. I think both of those will be nice ways to go. But you guys, we're coming up against a break here over on the grid on Sports Millions. We'll be back in the next couple of minutes here to talk the Titans and the Jags. So don't go anywhere.
Pop one of those gold coins. One of those gold coins.
Welcome into Sports Millions over here on the grid. I'm Joe Madden, joined by Tom Vecchio. Tom, we've talked the Broncos and the Bengals, the Cardinals and the Rams, and now we have to talk the Titans and the Jags. Are you excited for this game?
There's a lot to break down for this one. We have some good receivers we can look to, but first, check out the Sports Millions Social Casino featuring classic slots and brand new game concepts. The social casino features the opportunity to win large sweepstake coins, and the games are always free to enter. Go play now at sportsmillions.com/social-casino. That's sportsmillions.com/social-casino. We have Jags, we have the Titans. They are on deck for this weekend. Some interesting factors, some interesting motivation factors, specifically from the quarterbacks from both teams. There's obviously Trevor Lawrence is done for the year. What does that mean for Mac Jones and him moving forward, potentially hitting free agency? What does it mean for Mason Rudolph on the other side? Will Levis has been benched multiple times this year. There's a path to both of them wanting to put up big games over the final 2 weeks to kind of interest other teams, interest their own teams to kind of keep them around for the next year.
Yeah, they both definitely will want to highlight their skills out there. So I think we start looking at both of these quarterbacks here. Now we only have a passing yard pick that we can play around with the higher or a lower. Mac Jones coming in at 213.5 and Mason Rudolph at 223.5. Do you trust either of these quarterbacks with their arms? We know both can scramble as well, but I'm looking here at Mac Jones. I really do think Mac Jones should be able to find some of the weapons out there on the field at 213.5. I like it to the higher. I just think this one seems a little low, Tom.
I would agree. It also comes down to the fact that I have a little bit more faith in the Jaguars' offensive options around Mac Jones. I think Calvin Ridley's great for the Titans, but who else would Mason Rudolph be throwing the ball to? And I have a bit more confidence in Brian Thomas Jr., who has been awesome this year, the rookie wide receiver for the Jags. More confidence there. Brenton Strange, the backup tight end, who's played a bigger role over the past few weeks with Evan Ingram done for the season. So I would absolutely side with Mac Jones, him getting the ball out there, going over 213. I think the Titans defense is good, but I'm also not worried about taking a player against them. So you could side with Mac Jones. I think that's fine. Do you prefer Mac Jones or do you prefer Brian Thomas Jr.? Only one from the Jags that we're going to be taking.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at Brian Thomas Jr. here because that number coming in at 78 receiving yards. I think if he is able to go higher than this, then Mac Jones is also able to go higher than that passing yard as well. I think they correlate together here. Tom, what are your thoughts on it?
I totally agree. I want to say I want to side with Brian Thomas and Calvin Ridley. At the end of the day, I think they are better at what they do compared to Mac Jones and Mason Rudolph. So, you can look to, Cam Little's up here on the board. Maybe they get stopped and he picks up a bunch of field goals over, higher than 1.5 field goals. I think that's a fine way to go about things. But Brian Thomas and Calvin Ridley, I think these are just the easy answers for this game. No need to get crazy on anything.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean here for the Titans higher on Calvin Ridley. I think he will be the number one target out there for Mason Rudolph. So I will go higher than the 59.5 receiving yards there for him. But you made a good point there with Cam Little. I do think he has the opportunity for higher than 1.5 field goals. I like that rather than the kicking points in this one. While I do think both of these quarterbacks should have a strong day, strong numbers out there, I do think the defense will provide some resistance in the red zone for both of these quarterbacks. We know they haven't been quarterbacks that you can really trust out there in that red zone, Tom. So if you're looking at the kicker, Cam Little, I would go higher than 1.5 field goals. Do you agree with that? Or would you like his kicking points higher than 6.5?
It's got to be the field goals. Like you said, at the end of the day, neither of these offenses are high-flying offenses, but that leads to them being stopped at a certain point when it gets to the red zone, when they get over, midfield, whatever it might be. So we have faith in the quarterbacks just because I'm not too worried about the Jags defense, but I'm also not super confident in the Jags offense to put up a ton of points. So if they get stalled and they have to settle for a bunch of field goals, I would not be surprised by that in any capacity. So I want to lock in Brian Thomas Jr. higher than 78.5 receiving yards. He has been awesome for them this season. And then I'm just going to be trusting the veteran Calvin Ridley on the other side higher than 59.5. Keep it super simple for this game.
Tom, at the end of the day, this could be an absolutely ugly game, or this could be an exciting one out here. It's going to depend on what these defenses are able to do and how they show up. I'm going to lock in Mac Jones higher than 213.5 passing yards, and then I will lock in Calvin Ridley here higher than 59.5 receiving yards. I really hope, Tom, this is an exciting game. I hope both of these quarterbacks are able to have success. But you guys, thanks so much for joining us today over here on Sports Millions on the Grid. We'll be back tomorrow, so we'll see you then.